Good evening. A call to order the Citizens Budget Review Advisory Committee for Monday, June 6, 2016. Would you all rise, please, for the Pledge of Allegiance? And Ms. Watson, could we have a roll call, please? Turn your mic on.
Ed Hurlhay.
Here.
Michael Frank will not be attending. Sergio
Here.
Moda. Tim Slavin will not be attending. Terry Taylor.
Present.
Harry Hall.
Present.
Deona Farmer.
Present.
Thank you. Okay, I need a motion to approve the minutes of the meeting of February 29th, 2016.
I make a motion.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. And Mr. Kilgore, you are up for presentation of the second quarter 2016 budget amendments and financial report.
Thank you. I did want to mention I've got Cynthia Watson sitting in tonight. She's my assistant director and manager of the human resources, IT, and audiovisual divisions at this point. She's volunteered to sit in. I'm sorry I didn't brief her on taking the role there, but we'll get started on the budget amendment. Pretty much standard kind of package I present to the City Council, including the resolution that shows any kind of budget transfers that we've made during the period. A couple of significant ones that were approved by the Council were the using some funds in the CRA to do contractual landscaping services in that area. This is up and down the CRA area, north to south, and including the park. And also the purchase of a piece of armadillo equipment, which will help with our ditch cleaning program. When you get into the graphics, the couple of graphs there on general fund, our reserves at this point in the year are higher than, which is typical. We receive most of our ad valorem taxes and other revenue, and some of our other revenues cause us to kind of build up our reserves at this point in the year, and then by September, of course, they will come down as we have less revenue coming in. It was affected because of the early retirement payouts. Actually, all of them didn't hit by the end of March. There was still a couple of payouts yet to go. We will be adjusting the budget. We're actually working on that adjustment this week to cover that, and it'll take about $250,000 out of the reserve account to cover it this year. We expect to have the payback coming in next year's numbers to replenish the reserves. I'll mention more about that a little bit later. On the graph at the bottom left of the page, I did have an arrow there. The first set of columns there reflecting the second quarter of 2015. I picked up some bad numbers there. Actually, our revenues by the second quarter of this year are about $83,000 higher than last quarter. I wanted to mention on the graph in the bottom that shows the various departments and how they fared against the budget. You see a few of them are over the 50% mark. That includes administrative services, because I lost Nancy Veet that took the program and had a rather large payout. We had a large payout in growth management by, and also the Public Works and Police Department had were affected by that. So once we make the budget adjustment, their percentages will be less. I mean, they're not too bad overall. They almost are about 55% at the 50% mark in the year. So, but we do need about $250,000 reallocated to those departments. On the next page, I show the special revenue funds and capital projects graph. All three categories on the special revenue funds are ahead of budget. They're looking pretty positive for this year's collections. As far as the capital projects, we've still got a couple of, or several large projects that haven't been expended yet, including Tulip Drive, the Cavcore parking, which is on the agenda for this Wednesday's City Council meeting for approval of that contract. The golf course irrigation project is still ongoing, and the hangar projects at the airport. We've got some substantial budgets between the grant monies and the matching funds on those grants to cover, so that's why there's a large gap between budget and actual. For the golf course, the graph on the lower left, it includes the capital fund, and with that, we are about $100,000 better off in terms of amounts of reserves in the golf course. Or actually, I should say the amount of deficit in the golf course. But it is, you know, we've had our busy season, and we've got higher revenues that we collected over that period. For the following months of the year, I'm sure that will decline. On the following page, I have the graphs on the airport. It is slightly ahead of its reserves from what we had at the end of the last fiscal year. So this year is looking pretty favorable. The amount of expenditures have gone up because we are in this year repaying the part of the loan that general fund made back like in 2006, I believe, where they had some legal fees, so the general fund advanced them that money, so we are starting to pay that back, and that's affecting the expenditure numbers and why you see those expenditures higher than last year. Building department is in pretty fair shape. We're getting a good amount of revenues from additional permits. Those are coming in strong, and it has increased the fund balance over what it was at the end of last fiscal year. The next bit of information I give you is on the summaries of each fund. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on those. Some of this information is kind of summarized to the point it probably wouldn't be useful for you. We'll give you the breakdown of each department and where they stand between personnel, operating, and capital and their budgets. We also give you the capital project status report. Capital projects overall, I did add a total at the bottom of this report that hadn't been there before to kind of give you an idea of what percent projects across citywide have fared. We're showing about a 44.4% completion of the projects that are compared to their budgets. But with the encumbrance amount, that's about 55% completed if you incorporate that number in the percentage calculation. On the quarterly investment report, I did successfully find another outlet to put some of our cash deposits on. It doesn't reflect in March yet, but I know I've expressed to you in the past that I was concerned that we've got our monies in the bank account with the local bank and with the State Board of Administration account, and we've only got it split between those two funds. Well, I found another entity that's called Florida Trust, and Florida Trust was created by counties and county clerks and county governments to have a place to, for governments to basically place their monies and in a pool kind of account. And this particular one has a program that I recommended to the city council that will invest longer term, whereas the state board and our bank account are overnight investments. This pool goes out to a maximum of 5 years. They average about 2 or 2.5 years in duration. But with that, we can about double our amount of return on the funds because they will draw more. So because of that longer-term investment, we should be seeing some improvement in our interest earnings. I have not yet placed any deposits in that account, just as a matter of just working out the mechanics with them to set up the fund. And I will probably start with some small deposits initially. I'm thinking probably a maximum of about $3 million going into this account, keep about 3.5 in the state board, and then it gets us down to a balance in the bank of about 5. So that way I've got our eggs kind of split into 3 different baskets. So just a precaution that I've been wanting to achieve. In the last section there, I show you the cash reserves. You can see our equipment and facilities repair and replacement reserve is down to $297,000. Also at this city council meeting, there's a proposal to work on the air conditioning here above the city council, and that's going to cost about $32,000. So we're getting down to about $260,000 in that renewal and replacement reserve. So I'm hoping the results of this fiscal year will show some kind of positive difference between revenues and expenses in general fund. And according to the resolution that established this, I would then put those extra funds in, replenish the reserve or put some more money in there. I think generally we're doing well as far as catching up with some of these, the design of that fund was intended to cover us for those things that had built up over the years where we hadn't been maintaining things as well as we should because of financial restraints. So it's been successful. And a nice feature, a nice flexibility for us. And as far as the budget, we don't have to budget every contingency. We can just use this fund to cover those things that, like the air conditioner, that apparently has pooped out on us. So. The balance of the report are the reports from the departments on their activities for the quarter. Other than that, I'd be glad to answer any questions or any concerns that you might have.
Okay, folks, let's start with questions. Mr. Taylor?
I don't have any at this time.
Okay. Mr. Mono?
No questions at this time, thank you.
Mr. Hall?
I was just wondering, would there be any, excuse me, savings with the armadillo that we might be able to consider transferring some of those savings over into pavement of the roads? Or any of the roundabout?
Yeah, it's kind of involved, but, we had the quarter round project that was putting in the quarter round citywide. And they were basically doing ditch maintenance, and the idea or the concept behind buying the armadillo was that then we could better maintain the ditches and right-of-way areas. So there would be some offsetting savings, so to speak, in that sense. But in terms of, I wouldn't project that there's going to be monies made available because we would be operating that equipment. I'm not anticipating that we can really show any savings there.
Just wondering about the operation cost versus the quarter round equipment and all, whether there be any savings there, and if there were, if those could be considered to be transferred over to the road fund.
Well, I was going to report on the overall budget preparation and the next agenda item, and I think that's one thing that that I want to share with you is kind of what are our priorities are going to be, based on the comments the Budget Committee has made, as well as the City Council in setting their goals. I mean, the roads and drainage is probably the number one issue. So.
Thank you.
I'm good. I had no questions.
No questions?
None at all. He asked the only one I had.
All right, to wrap up the presentation, I'll make the motion that the Budget Review Committee approves City Resolution R16-11, which approves the second quarter 2016 budget amendment and financial report. And I need a second.
Second.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 That's unanimous. And we've got that one done. Okay. Mr. Kilgore, you're on again. Update on the progress on fiscal 2017 budget preparation.
Yes. I shared with the committee that we have received the estimated values from the property appraiser's office, only a 3.1% growth. I heard that the newspaper presented a different percentage, but I think they said like 3.4. Bottom line is that the amount, which is an even $1 billion,
I think that's what you said.
I think it's $1 billion even is the number they gave us. And if I applied that to using our same rate, our same current millage rate of 3.8556, that generates about $112,000 in terms of additional tax revenue. Now, I don't have the breakdown. It's not provided by the county until I believe it's due the 27th of this month, of how much of that is new growth versus reassessments or increases in values, because that affects what our rollback then would be. Not to get too complicated, but the CRA transfer is also based on the values within that area. So that can also affect how much net revenue that we get from the final property certified values. I'll kind of put that in perspective. We are aiming to put in the budget a 3% increase in payroll. We haven't yet negotiated the labor agreements. We are set up now finally with a meeting at the end of this month on June 28th to begin negotiations there. We're putting the 3% in the budget just to have a holder in there. It's still subject to negotiation, of course, and but that dollar value for general fund would be about $230,000 of cost. So you can see the $112,000 from additional taxes is not going to cover it alone. I mean, there'll be increases in other revenues such as utility taxes, franchise fees, and so forth. But there's also increased requests from the departments in some cases. So we're working hard to come up with the rough draft that I hope to give to the committee on June 20th. That's only 2 weeks away. We've still got a lot of work to do. We've got to meet with the departments. Don't know if we'll make it for sure or not, but we should be able to give you some kind of information on our scheduled meeting for the 20th. I think the biggest doubt that I have at this point is not so much in the department's operating request, but in the capital budget side, and between our major sources there with the DST, the stormwater fees, and the CRA, trying to get all those needs for capital expenditures in, to fit within those sources of revenue is probably going to be a challenge. One other thing I probably would want to throw in is we haven't heard about our group insurance yet. We usually have the broker come to us about this time of the year and brief us on what our experience looks like as far as health insurance coverage, and give us some estimate of what that cost is going to be, because that has a pretty large impact on the budget. This year, I have issued a request for proposal from various insurance companies on our liability and workers' comp policies. That's part of the reason why I'm a little bit behind on the budget side of it, because preparing that RFP and now responding to their inquiries is eating up some of my time. But aside from that, everything's good. We will continue to work hard to get that, a packet to you on the 20th of June. And I probably won't have it in advance. It'll probably be a matter of, we'll have the meeting, here it is, and we'll give some brief highlights. You're probably not going to have much of an opportunity to study it in advance. But we do have then, I think, it's July. Yeah, after the June 20th meeting, on July 11th, we were scheduled to actually have y'all comment on the budget and decide what your recommendation for the proposed millage would be. So it's also going to kind of put a rush on y'all if you have issues or questions and you want to have a secondary meeting or whatever before it actually goes to the council. Because the council has to approve it at their meeting on July 13th. Only because their following meeting is the day that it's due back to the property appraiser. So if we run into delay and have to slide the schedule somehow, it may involve some special meetings, both of the committee or the city council. But we're trying to avoid that. We're doing what we can. And that's really all I wanted to throw out there as far as the update. Be glad to also take any questions on this item.
Okay, anyone got questions, comments?
Ken, I was just going to question the community redevelopment area that you mentioned. Where are the boundaries for that area?
Almost have to show you on the map, but if you around the triangle area on 512, if you go from there just north of the park on the north end to the water, and then going north, did I say north? To the south of the 512. But going north, it goes almost all the way to the city limits, if I'm not mistaken. But it's basically on the other side of US 1.
Sure.
On the east
I
side.
know Mr. Nolte produced some estimates for the media last week. Did he by any chance provide any estimates for that CRA?
No, and that's part of what I'll get. I think it's due on the 27th from them. I'm sorry, June 24th. I should have that information. And that'll give me a way or a means to calculate the rollback rate, to know how much the transfer is to the CRA.
Okay, and remind me again what the estimate for the city of Sebastian was? 2.9% increase?
3.1.
3.1, okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Hall?
Yes, a little new to city budgeting. Curious as how this works. We make a recommendation to the board for the millage, but what if we recommend a different amount and the board agrees? Is that at the time that you and the board would decide which items would have to be eliminated or dipped into the reserve, either or? Is that how it works?
Well, staff is responsible for presenting a balanced budget to the city council. what we've done, and I think we did a couple years ago, we said, okay, if you guys want rollback, this is your balanced budget. If you want additional street work, money's going to the lagoon, and for to put some money aside for the all aboard Florida issue, then you're gonna have to increase the millage, and that's how we ended up to the 3.8556 that we have now. So my thinking, and, we'll have to really firm up the numbers before I can commit to it, but, and of course, the city manager will have a role in that to say, okay, can we even reach the rollback revenue level? Will that still be adequate to cover our basic needs? But I would suggest to you that anything above rollback, we would have reasoning as to why we might want to go with a higher rate. What the process is we present that to the budget committee. And we then take the results of y'all's opinion and vote, most likely, to say that you either endorse our suggestion, or you want to go with the rollback, or you want some other rate, or you maybe split the baby, have some different options there.
So we will be presented the budget, your recommendations, and we would give our input on whether we think there's too much for a department or not enough for a department
Exactly.
prior to considering the millage.
And, hopefully we share, if you've got concerned about a particular level of funding for one department or the other, or a project you don't like in there, I try to be forthright to the council when I present to them and say, we did have some discussion as to why, but, on the other hand, I hope staff will have a chance to explain to you why we feel, to give you a chance to say, well, maybe you're right. But, yeah, it's a joint process, and we try to work as a team to come up with what makes sense, put it before the council, and they make the final call, so.
Well, of course, I just used from the county level, looking at public input, and then the advisory committee sometimes will think that the public wants more police, or they want a cutback in a certain area. So it may be different from what the staff has come up with, and I didn't know if that's the way it'd be presented to this board.
It's very, I wouldn't say very possible, because the committee's kind of been supportive of what staff's put before you, because we put a lot of time and effort into it, but certainly when there's a difference, we're not offended, because you do have maybe, your charge really as a committee is to have your input as a citizen on what you think's going on, or what you think should be recommended, so that's fine with us.
I appreciate you explaining how it works here. Thank you.
No problem, sir.
Just to add, Mr. Hall, to what happened 2 years ago, because last year, the committee approved what staff approved and took to the council. But 2 years ago, the road situation really was horrible. And there was some money in the staff-approved budget, and this committee said, you need more. So we got $100,000 and put in that. And for the first time, we funded some money for the all-aboard Florida quiet zones. And those, we also funded $50,000 on drainage, a pretty specific area of drainage that needed it badly, down on Indian River Drive. And that was done again automatically last year. And it will happen again, we've got to remember that. That $200,000+ will happen, it's in the budget.
It's our, the way we look at it is that additional millage that was increased.
Right.
As long as we get enjoy that additional millage, we'll continue to fund those programs it was designed to pay for.
Let's say purely for talking purposes, that the committee feels that we really got to do something more about the roads. So I'll pick a number out of the air. Understand, it's out of the air. Let's say they want to put $300,000 in it. Then you take that, if the committee approves it, staff will say, well, then this will increase the millage thus and so. Then the committee takes it to the council. If the council wants to buy it, then the tax rate will be whatever that tax rate is. And if they don't, it'll be whatever the staff approves. And that's what happened 2 years ago.
I appreciate that. That's the way I'm used to seeing it at other agencies. And just looking at the calendar, it spoke to approving millage rates, and I just want to be assured that we would have some input as to looking at to what makes up the budget prior to deciding or recommending whether or not that's a fair millage rate.
Okay, and what we've done in the last few years is, once we put together our recommendation, we'll put together a brief PowerPoint, and we'll take that, and you people will see it. One way or another, we'll get it to you. And then you can say, well, I want to change this, or, what about that? And then we'll take that to council and show it to them. So we'll put it all together in a nice, neat package. That's generally the way we've worked in the recent past. Okay.
Excuse me, Ed?
Yes.
Ed, I would add one more thing. Him being you, Mr. Hall, you aren't aware. What we put together a book, basically, with all our numbers, our crunch, details of each department, showing line item by line item. That's the book I'm working on to present to y'all on the 20th. So you'll get it at the same time I give it to the city council. They probably aren't that interested at that point because they don't have to make a decision on it at that point. But that gives y'all a chance to kind of understand how the budget numbers are put together, and then give me feedback or questions if I've missed something. The council basically works off the same information. So it's not like we give some set of records to them and another set to you to make different arguments. Everybody's looking at the same documents. We put it on the website. If we have citizens that want to get involved in it, then that's fine as well.
I appreciate that, Ken. That's what I used to do at the sheriff's office once a year, but the book was about that thick, and each department,
Not quite that
line by
bad, but-
line. And does it also show what the staff requested and what was recommended to the board? Or is it just what the final number that's been?
Actually, what I included in the document, I have that information, of course. We use that in compiling it, but I usually only present what the manager's recommending.
And we get the historical on
With the history of the last 2 or 3
an
years.
increase or decrease for that line item?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
And Harry, what's even better about it, the committee is represented by the chairman that addresses the city council based on our consensus and our approval. So we all have the opportunity to review. Ken does a phenomenal job organizing these things, and though we're down to some specific timelines, it's easy enough for us to understand whether or not the millage is sufficient to account for everything, or we need to just address it. But all in all, this committee will give our recommendation of support and or address the city council. And usually Ed does that as the chairman of the committee.
Okay, Ken, you're all set, you're done as far as your update?
Yes.
Okay. Item 7, this really is discussion amongst ourselves on issues that might be important to you. So any input that we can give Ken now, and I'll kick it off with our most favorite subject of many years, called roads and drainage. Just to recap, I think you probably all know that the city council earlier this year approved a fairly large set of projects to repave a group of roads. And there are more on the horizon and an awful lot more to be done. As a side comment, this Wednesday, the city council will take up an approval of what's called a pothole patch truck. And all of you are certainly familiar with potholes in Sebastian, because we have a surfeit of them. And it has been very difficult for them to keep up with that. And this vehicle automates an awful lot of it. It's something the county has and is used very successfully, and it's used all over the country, and they're proposing one for Sebastian, and that will really help us get some of these roads in decent shape and keep them that way, rather than a pothole being filled and 2 weeks later, wide open again. Anyway, back to roads. I have no idea what the staff is going to approve, and given the relatively small increase in assessed valuation, and just given a quick look at what Ken just said, where a 3%, proposed 3% salary increase amounts to $230,000, and we have a proposed increase of 112, we're already short. So that spells a problem. So I throw something out for your consideration and to take home. It's just an idea. Yes, you could go for tax increase and put a lot of money into the roads. And that's not going to go over real well. On the other hand, should the city, given the low interest rate on borrowing, and here's another key, still low, even though the gas prices have jumped, the low cost of oil, it's still just below $50 a barrel. Whether it'll ever roll back to 30, who knows. But the cost of asphalt is way down. We've seen that. So given that borrowing is inexpensive and asphalt is inexpensive, should the city consider borrowing a reasonably large sum of money to repair the majority of the roads that are in trouble? And a one-shot deal and spread it over time and get this behind us. In other words, it's a catch-up. Just an idea. Something for you to think about. We've borrowed some before, but this would cover, and I've forgotten what the dollar value is of the roads that are in bad shape. But Mr. Watanabe has that number. I think he's done a report and given it to city manager and to Ken.
He's promised to give me some updated numbers any day now. If I could jump in on that,
Yeah.
I know you're probably not prepared to fully debate it or anything, but we've got an existing bond issue that's paid out of local gas taxes. That's about $242,000 a year of debt service. And that's going to continue until like 2022, well, fiscal year 2023. We have about $630,000 coming in local option gas taxes. So that's taking a big chunk out every year of what we've got then to spend on new road projects. So that's just the downside. I understand what you're saying, and if if it was decided to finance a lot of streets, like you say, and add some debt service, financially, you could structure it where some of the, like the principal is deferred until after this one is paid off, perhaps. And depending on how long you extended the term of the new loan, you might still be able to do that and provide some sizable funds to immediately go out for. But I would just caution you that adding more debt and using all your incoming revenues from gas taxes, which is in theory going to fund your road resurfacing, it's just that we got so far behind. So now we're in that catch-up mode. When we get into the other key factor in looking at the roadways is that local option gas taxes can be used for building new roads or repairing old roads. But when you get to discretionary sales taxes, which is maybe another possibility for funding some of the city engineers' suggested paving projects, when it's a reconstruction kind of thing, which a lot of these problem areas are, we can reach to the DST fund, the discretionary sales tax. So it's a balancing thing that once I get better numbers from the engineer and kind of we know what kind of ideal investment we're going to make next year. The other argument I've heard that adds to your deliberations, I would hope, is that the big problem with the roadways is the storm drainage. Because when things don't drain, the water sits on the roads deteriorate faster. So I would say maybe number one priority is the drainage system, and then secondarily the roads, to the extent we can bring them up to standard and get it to a manageable annual amount of resurfacing we can do to not have this problem the next time. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to elaborate too much, but I thought that was useful.
That's perfect. Well, as an aside, this building, the bond issue payments end next year or 18? We're forever jockeying back and forth what year it is. Well, in any event, it's very shortly.
It retires not next year, but the year after.
So it retires in 18.
Yes.
And that's a sizable amount of money.
That's running about almost $1 million until this year.
Okay. So there's another thought to add in the hopper as far as the road situation, as far as pure debt.
As long as it qualifies under DST, yeah.
Yeah.
Because there again, it has to be new construction or like a complete rebuild. It can't just be what they call normal maintenance, which would be just resurfacing.
I understand. Okay. And with that, I'll stop talking. Anybody else got any ideas or things they want to throw out?
I don't have a copy in front of me, but I remember looking at it a few days ago. It looked like there were some roadwork projects that were appropriated, but no expenditures yet. Is there a timeline or projection on when those would be?
I think Ed referred to it a little bit earlier. The city council did appropriate, I think it was like $760,000 towards roads back in, I want to say around March.
I think it was February, March, Ken.
February, March timeframe. And of course, what we get into is you got to go out for bid. You got to design the specs. In between the design time, going out for bids, getting the bids, getting back to the city council, I think they're pretty close to having that. In fact, the contract was, if I recall the last council meeting, they approved the contract.
I think before that.
Was it before last meeting?
That was the one to Ranger Construction for approximately $300,295.
You're right.
And I think they're going to start momentarily on 5 roads.
Good.
And also, since that was done, because of the funding sources, they shifted some of that and said Barber Street is now going to be rebuilt, or that was in a recent council meeting too. I'm sorry, I don't really have a chronological cheat sheet on that one.
Well, I
But
think
yeah,
that-
it just takes well, you're familiar with governments and how they work, but going through all our steps that we have to take.
But
I think we ended up, out of that roughly 700,000, the bid was a major surprise in being way lower than anybody estimated. There were some changes made, as suggested by several of the contractors, which reduced the cost. So then I guess they've decided to go on, given that low bid, go on and do some other roads, including Barber Street Extension, if you will, north of,
Which I think was at one time it was on the schedule for like next year, or
right.
so we did.
And then there's some other roads that they're looking at, but I don't know what they are.
Well, it seemed like every time we have a major rainstorm, then they reevaluate it and say, hey, this road got washed out more than we, advanced to a bad condition faster than we anticipated, so.
thank you.
Okay, anything else, ladies and gentlemen?
I'll say, I agree with you, Ken, when it comes to, when it comes to tackling the problem of stormwater, before that of making sure our roads are repaved. And I agree with the chairman when it comes to making sure that we have money allocated towards those areas. I personally can't approve a tax increase, and if it came to the decision of whether or not we want to decide on whether or not we should have a bond in order to address some of these issues, I personally would have to recuse myself. This is some of the work that I do with an investment firm in Vero. But aside from that, I'm on the same page with you when it comes to tackling our problems before they become bigger issues, and that includes our stormwater issues, our irrigation issues, and making sure that our roads some of our roads are properly dealt with.
Thank you, sir. Okay, anybody got anything else? Mr. Hall?
I do. It's okay. I was just, I don't want to make any sudden decisions or discussions until we see the numbers from Watanabe. Because if you're waiting for those right now, that's going to play a role on how we do things. I agree with you, Sergio, in the respect that we do need to look at the stormwater piece of it, but I was there when they made the decision of increasing the millage and where everything was being allocated, and there was a huge discussion on making sure that we had that extra funding there just in case, which we really need to look at, because if they're having that discussion about a 3% increase for their pay, then that's not going to cover the money that we need, though. We're still going to be in deficit of 120, right, or 112. So we need to do something to be able to cover that deficit.
Thank you. Harry?
I have a question. Sergio, when you're talking about no tax increase, are you talking about no tax increase or no millage increase?
No millage increase. And
Because you can maintain the millage and it still is technically a tax increase.
And again, that's the ideological position that I hold. I'm a fiscal conservative, and that's, again, the reason why I hold that position of not having a millage increase or not having a tax increase, again, is because of my ideological position. On the Charter Review Advisory Committee, we had a discussion on whether or not city council members should receive an increase in salaries, and I was one of only 2 committee members that disapproved of that decision of increasing salaries for city council members. So again, it's an ideological position, if that answers your question.
I was just trying to get some clarification,
Yeah.
whether we're talking actual tax increase or millage increase, because they're different. You can have no millage increase, and it'll still be legally a tax increase. So I just trying to understand what you were saying.
I understand.
Okay, anybody else? All right, that finishes number 7. Number 8, public input. Anybody from the public wish to speak? Nobody from the public wishes to speak. Okay, staff matters. Mr. Kilgore, you got anything else?
Really nothing else to add. No, thank you.
Okay. That takes care of that. And anything else from the committee?
The budget, will that be online or a paper copy, or how does that do?
I
present
usually
to us?
furnish a notebook type format in hard copy as well as we put it online.
And so we will come by here to pick it up, or it'll
I
be
will probably
delivered
give
to
you a
us,
call
or-
and tell you that it's ready, and,
Okay, thank you.
you know, unless you prefer just the online copy, I can save a tree, but I know personally it's hard for me to work with something online when you're talking about the number of schedules that correlate to each other, and
No, it's easier for me with a paper copy too. Thank you.
Well, typically, you've also emailed it to us, have you not, in the past?
I
Or,
guess I have, yeah. I think maybe the same version that I post online I think I do provide it to you. Certainly like the presentations, I try to do the PowerPoints that I'm going to present and get that to you in advance, so you kind of have a chance to know what the data is, so you have a heads up on it.
okay. Anything else? All right. With that, we are adjourned.